Cheers, just having a glass of wine. Thought I'd do a quick follow-up from the video I did yesterday. I was talking about Lucy Letby, the conviction, and now we find today that she's been given a whole life term, hasn't she? I've been quite active on social media today. The main reason I'm doing it is trying to hopefully direct some people to that main website that I talked about in the last one. Rex v Lucy Letby 2023.com. There's another really good Substack that's been recently started. Well, it might have been going for a while to do with other subjects, but it's a substack.com, and it's at this is all one word, at Law, Health and Tech, TECH Tech, at Law, Health and Tech. I'll put it in the description. Finding on Twitter today there's a number of people who also feel similar disquiet about the conviction and about how this has gone down, with concerns about whether this is a miscarriage of justice and not really understanding how beyond reasonable doubt could have been met as the bar. Yes, people can say, well, you weren't at the trial, you weren't in the jury, and you haven't seen all the evidence, and yes, that's true. But there's quite a lot of I'm finding quite persuasive arguments here as to some of the principles related to some of the broad principles, in that there were higher rates of death in subsequent years in that unit. I've not followed some of these ideas to their original source, but I'm going by some of them as taking them at face value. That's all I can do at the moment. All any of us can do, I mean. And the Substack I mentioned, there was some very interesting stuff about the building itself, which had a problem with water contamination, allegedly sewage coming out of the taps, and that this building was refitted, or even, I think even, what's the word that's used here? It's the Substack of that guy that I've just told you about, but the point that's made here, I'll read it out. Was the building's destruction intended to destroy it? So the building was destroyed afterwards, where that unit was, in order to destroy all evidence that the ongoing plumbing issues, I'm reading here, the ongoing plumbing issues had resulted in colonisation of hospital wastewater pathogens that are common causes of neonatal death in such units. So basically, did they cement over what might have been the actual problem that was causing the deaths, and maybe had been causing the deaths for a good long while, and perhaps had been causing deaths in that hospital in other parts of the hospital, and that was the big story that they've covered up. I don't know. We don't know. It's got to be looked into again. I hope to God there's an appeal. I hope Lucy Letby's being protected in prison from obviously some of the people who want to make a name for themselves in that environment by attacking her. Egged on, no doubt, by some of the lovely people you find on Twitter. Egged on, no doubt, by the ghastly, hideous mainstream media who are just salivating all over it. Who wouldn't know critical thought if it... Anyway, you know what I'm saying. We can talk about many other subjects in relation to that, what the mainstream media are in terms of their... I mean, there's a moral free zone, really, isn't it? As long as it sells their stories. Do they really care if the right person, or do they really care if there was a crime at all? They just want, as I read on one of the Substacks or one of the other things, is it a kind of witch hunt against this young nurse? Somebody said, making a reference to Arthur Miller's the play The Crucible, said, are they all pointing fingers at some Goody Proctor? It's like a character in The Crucible, one of the people who was designated a witch. People said people have said, well, why weren't there other people to speak for her? And I mean, that was the defence's choice, wasn't it? But they brought in the plumber, so that was quite an interesting aspect to it, in terms of, was there contamination of the water that led to this spike in deaths of the babies? But and we've got to keep coming back to the fact that the rate of neonate deaths actually went up after Lucy Letby left. So in 2018 and 19, they're higher than in 2015 and 16 when she was there. Another point was made on the main website that I referenced, Rex v Lucy Letby, is that the rate of deaths wasn't excessive when you looked at the whole. Well, it was a sort of an average rate of deaths when you compared it to all the units across the country across 2015-16. That's not to say that more should have been done for those babies, or were all the consultants competent? Do we know that? Do we know much about them people, other than they all got together to choose someone who was responsible for everything going wrong, except for the deaths and the collapses where they couldn't pin it on her, so they're kind of put to the side, aren't they? So this is, I believe it's called confirmation bias. So they'll only look for evidence which supports the theory. This is the fundamental. I don't know how best to describe this, but it's the idea: you've already found someone guilty. Now you need to construct the case around them, rather than the evidence leading to that person. It bothered me. I don't know if I said this in the last one, that Dr. J. Ram, I can't. That's not exactly how you spell it. J. Ram. He said that the point where he felt he knew that Lucy Letby was deliberately harming the children was when he came into a room, and Lucy was by one of the beds or incubators where the baby was, not doing anything, just standing there, and that an oxygen lead or oxygen pipe had come out. And he said, well, that does happen. So he says, and this is a TV interview with this guy, and he's one of the consultants there. He said that does happen. If a baby can move around quite a lot, they can become dislodged. But he ends the end of that segment in that interview saying, but in this case, the only way it could have happened was that if it was deliberately removed, because when he saw the baby wasn't moving very much. But that's not to say that baby had not been moving prior, is it? So he's contradicted himself. He said, it could happen by accidental means, or by means of the baby moving around. And then he says, categorically, the only way that could have happened, the only way that oxygen pipe could have come out of the baby is that the oxygen flow is by the person standing there having deliberately, he didn't witness her doing it, but he's just assumed that she must have done it. So those two things clash. And moreover, that instance, the one that tipped him over into believing that it was definitely her Lucy Letby harming children, was an instance in which she was not found guilty for that. She was not found guilty for that. So I just thought that was interesting as well. This idea that they should drag her up in chains to face anyway, it's done now, and I won't go into that. The judge gave the sentencing. I can tell on Twitter there's a and hopefully elsewhere as well, there's a groundswell of people, and I set a lot of store by this, feeling an instinctual distrust of what's happened here, an instinctual disquiet and distrust, and they just feel something. There's something in us as humans that those feelings are often quite valid. I'm not saying they're infallible, and you can make mistakes and you can be misled, but there's a lot of people feeling that now, and they're finding each other, and they're talking about, how can we help? Hopefully there'll be an appeal. Hopefully that's I don't know what the grounds of the appeal will be, and that's for legal minds to work out, isn't it, within that system. I didn't think I was going to speak so long about this today. Just as a side note, I don't want to make it as nothing to, but I just found it interesting today, putting comments on various YouTube things and tweets, you get responses from people. This is awful. Shouldn't really be a laughing matter, but you get responses from people who say to you, it's people like you, in other words, questioning the convictions, people like you that make these things happen. I mean, I'm sorry, but if you're dealing with the minds like that, well, I don't engage further, obviously. Or they say things like you're a twisted this or that or other. It's almost like you've got malintent by doing this. Well, no, you're not making any friends by making these statements in the wider social media world, because the slipstream, the easier way, is where you find all these journalists and everything going down, isn't it? Which they're just saying, trying to outdo each other to say how evil the person is without knowing that much about the case or the trial or any of the contradictory factors here. Probably going on a bit too long now, but oh God, it's weird, isn't it? I thought I might write to... I've not done anything like this before in my life. I mean, I've thought about, cases in the news, but I've never made videos about them, but I thought about writing to Lucy Letby's parents. Hopefully a card or something will get there, just to say that there are people out there that aren't persuaded and that feel this great concern and feel that, well, my instinct is telling me that she's been scapegoated. That's what... Yes, I could be wrong, of course, but that's where I am with it. And the point would be to have an appeal in which all the issues that are coming up now and greater light is thrown on them, to see whether a second jury would find that they believe in her guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, and that's the crux of the matter. I don't quite see how they've reached that threshold. Anyway, that's it. Thank you. Cheers. Bye-bye.